All right, let's switch gears. Let's go way back to where you were born.
I'm a complete British mongrel.
Right.
So I'm like, my mum's Welsh and my dad's a mixture of Scottish, English and French.
All right.
We do live in Scotland when me and my wife, before we were here, we were living in Edinburgh.
All right.
But I was born in Manchester.
Right.
So my mum's side of the family are very much sort of Welsh mining and steelworking community, very active trade unionists.
Were they musicians or in entertainment?
There were quite a few singers, but I don't think anyone played an instrument particularly. But they definitely had that sort of political side. Right. So my great uncle Morgan Morgans, he spent the war locked naked in a cell with a British uniform hanging up, saying, "When you put this up on, you can go out." And he's like, "I will not go out and kill another worker, whether they're German or from wherever. Absolutely not." So there were a lot of sort of social activists on that side. And then my gran and granddad on that side, they were like the first people who'd ever been to university in their families and were English teachers, very into poetry, both wrote quite a lot as well. So I guess that sort of comes from there.
Yes.
On my dad's side, my gran was from Huguenot scientists who'd come over to Britain. Granddad from a market gardening family, and they both became doctors. And Gran started the first ever women's health clinic in Britain, just outside Manchester. And she said every week angry husbands would come throwing bricks through the window saying, "You can't tell my wife what to do with her body." But she was, I guess a trailblazer as well.
Yeah, right.
And Dad was definitely very, Gran used to say about him her coming home from her work at the clinic and finding there were no cooking utensils in the house. And Dad as a 14-year-old saying, "I took them down to the women's refuge because they need them more than us."
Wow.
So
humanitarian.
Yeah, but a little bit headstrong always. Which I think came across from that story too.
Right.
Yeah. So and I kind of grew up in a commune in Hebden Bridge. Dad trained as a doctor, but he hated the patriarchal system. He never actually worked, didn't practice. He worked on building sites. Mum was making an anthology of feminist verse for Penguin books and working as a cleaner. So they kind of, from their parents having come from very working class backgrounds to being doctors and teachers, they almost kind of stepped back to try to become more working class. I don't think it was a deliberate thing, but I mean, it was to the point where I had a Mohican, I was being an artist, lots of piercings, running an alternative theatre company, and they're like, "Oh, so creative."
Right.
And my brother was the complete rebel who got a first in business studies, always had short hair, went and joined an investment bank and voted Conservative.
Cheers to him.
So, from that back, I ended up working a lot of theatre, wrote a lot of plays, won the British Young Playwright of the Year when I was in my early 20s, and a few big national poetry competitions, had a collection of poetry published, and I was like, this is it. I am an artist.
Were you a shy guy? I would say not. Were you a shy guy? No?
I certainly had a lot of insecurities.
Right.
But I tended to get over them by talking a lot. I was
brought
quite
out,
good at talking my way out of maybe being a little bit too loud in the spotlight, having someone trying to knock you down and being, "Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right about my mum. It's so nice of you that you've been doing that with her because I think she's been lonely lately," rather than taking offence as it was meant.
Right. But where does the music come into it? I mean, the theatre, obviously, but where does music come into this?
Just playing in bands. I always, since I was sort of 13 or younger.
So combining the theatre with the...
Yeah, a lot of the theatre was musical theatre. Yeah. Not like musicals, but quite political stuff. We worked a lot with people who'd just come out of prison or who were just coming off heroin. We managed to get a sort of contract to deal with people who were living in halfway houses, as they were called, really trying to get over the addiction, get back into society. And so most of the cast were these absolutely brilliant, pretty rough Manchester guys mainly, but who were actually way more dedicated than some of the drama school people I'd got helping me, who were just determined to change their lives around.
Yeah.
They'd been on heroin since an early age. They may have had a couple of years in prison.
What a great idea.
And just saw this as a completely different thing. We built all the plays up on improvisations first. Then we toured, did sort of Stockport Theatre Festival, Buxton, Edinburgh. Yeah, that was a great few years. It was quite hairy sometimes.
Did it help them?
I think so. I'm only in touch with 2 of them still, but neither of them got back on heroin at all.
Oh, that's fair.
One of them has had a very up and down life with mental health issues still.
It's tough.
Yeah, it is tough. Andy Houlihan was just this force of nature, tiny guy who would do a couple of lines of whiz and 2 cans of special brew before he came into rehearsal, because it keeps me straight, Simon, it keeps me off the smack. And I remember him taking me out to his local pub in Wythenshawe, and it's the first time he'd gone there since he'd stopped dealing heroin. And 3 or 4 guys kind of surrounded him, you're giving a bad reputation, you need to start dealing again, other people are giving up, and getting really aggressive. And I was a middle class wimpy drama kid who played in a band. I was terrified.
Yeah.
And it was obviously about to get really nasty. And Andy was like, come here, mate, come here. And he bit one of these guys' ears off. He just grabbed him, bit his ear off, grabbed me by the neck, went, "Run, Simon!" And we legged it out of this pub. And I don't think I've been in Wythenshawe since.
Wow. I guess you don't see that every day.
Yeah. So that was a bit of my background. Anyway, I had a little film company for a while.
Oh, yeah.
Did a series of films with Scottish poets for the BBC, taking fairly famous living Scottish poets, getting them to choose a poem, usually with some sort of narrative structure. And me and my company, we'd turn it into a little film while they read the poem over it. So Jail Guitar Doors, which was Billy Bragg and Joe Strummer's project, trying to get people in prison, teach them to play guitars. Right. I mean, absolutely brilliant. They just went in with shed loads of guitars into what were the worst prisons in Britain, gave every inmate a guitar, and suddenly the violence stopped. Taught them how to play 3 chords, a few ideas about writing songs. Yeah. You suddenly got all these guys sitting for 23 hours a day in a cell who suddenly had something to do. Violence between inmates stopped.
That's so
violence
cool.
between inmates and guards stopped.
Such a great idea.
And yeah, it was never taken up by the guard, but they made a great documentary about it. And I mean, we just worked with a couple of the guys who were coming out of prison and did videos for them, so they could try and make it in pop and music.
So I was going to say before, you talked about being political in your theatre. Is it theatre work?
Mm-hmm. In life.
In life.
I'm just a honorary agitator who likes to disagree.
But the thing is, have an opinion, but people are sitting on the fence. You have a yay or nay.
And as you get older, you can also see other people's opinions better.
Yes.
I feel I am much less polarised now. In fact, I was called transphobic last week, and I would say it's quite tough to get more left-wing and believing that everyone should be exactly who they want to be than I am, as I think comes across in a lot of the songs.
Yeah. Is there any backlash from that?
Well, yeah, you see, I feel a lot of people on the left are very earnest. Billy Bragg was very earnest. The guys I was working with were really funny. They're like, you shouldn't be leaving your wallet on the table, Taco, or fucking be having that as soon as you go to the bar. And Billy's like, all right, guys, I don't think you should be encouraging that sort of joke because I think it'll give people wrong pressure.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of that earnestness, and I am an absolute piss taker, which does get me in trouble with the more woke.
Yes.
As well as with the more right. I mean, we were asked to play on a TV show in Shanghai recently. It was meant to be a celebration of diversity, of the foreign culture that is flourishing in Shanghai under the auspices of the wonderful Chinese government, who are very, very liberal and open and welcoming. And we kind of went, oh, do we want to look like stooges for the government and do this? You know, it's and we thought, well, if we get to choose the songs we're playing, we'll obviously not put the exact same lyrics into the censors that we have to say what we're playing. Then maybe we can still kind of slightly advocate for a little bit of social justice and a little bit more looseness in attitudes to people.
Yeah.
So it was like a little outdoor festival that was being filmed with lots of Korean kids doing dancing and Japanese. And then we come on there and we did a gay love song from Batman to Robin. We did Hey Snow White, which is a very... I've got a great quote about it. It's a feminist fairy tale princess sticking her Doc Martens into patriarchal narrative expectations. That's what an emerging indie band said about it. But yeah, it's a pretty feminist love song. And Shoot the Poets, which we wrote for Penn International, which is a company that fights to get writers and journalists out of prison. So it's very much about stopping censorship. And we haven't been arrested or kicked out of the country yet.
Yeah. So why China then?
I'd just never been here.
So you went to university, or did you? Mm-hmm. Yeah, you went to university. And...
Yeah, I. People don't actually believe this, but I was actually a very good springboard diver when I was a kid. I was British champion.
Yeah, right.
And they look at my more rotund form now, see me much more as an artist than a sportsman, which is fair enough to say.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had a diving scholarship to NC State in America.
Right.
So I did 2 years there. Jumped on a broken bottle, cut all the ligaments in my foot at an outdoor party. Came back, did drama in Manchester. Actually, I started doing fine art first, and then switched to drama in Manchester.
All through this time writing music with bands.
Yeah. Particularly once I was back in Manchester, I got very into it. We were in a few bands. We played with a lot of the sort of indie bands at the time that got labels, and we were just so sure we were better than them. We were about to be signed, and we never sent anything off. We just like, all these guys are getting signed. They're gonna find us.
Yeah.
And maybe it's good that they didn't, because to be honest, I'm still mates with some of these guys, and you know they dropped out of uni because they got signed, put on a record label. They've spent 20 years touring, having had one hit record, but then still knowing they're making good music. They're nearly all been married and divorced several times. They're doing endless nights on the road. You go into a club now to play in Britain, and we went and saw some of my mates' band called Haven, who had like 2 top 10 hits back in the day in like the 90s. And they were like, oh, guys, it's great to see you. They virtually stopped the show.
Yeah, right.
A few of us they actually knew came. And they just said, it's shite now. You get to the end of the night, you don't even get to meet the people who've paid to see you, because they're all ushered out of the club as you're packing your kit away so that they can recharge for them people to come in for a dance night. And they were just saying how miserable it is being a full-time musician. And you've still got that dream, and you haven't really got anything to fall back on. So I think I was very lucky being a complete failure as a playwright. I had 14 plays put on. Wasn't such a complete failure, but never made a living.
Yeah.
A few collections of poetry out. About at least 15, 20 albums. But actually, I was enough of a failure in all of those things that I ended up as a teacher, which I actually like. I teach film and art.
There you go.
And that's great. I still get paid to paint and run around with a camera.
Yeah.
And I'm not touring 300 days of the year. I bugger off to other cities at the weekend. And should I tell you about some of the people on the album? So as I said, I was trying to find people who weren't just white Europeans.
Yeah.
And one of the first ones I found was Pandita Ramabai, who actually died 100 years ago. But she was this brilliant women's rights Indian woman, complete activist. Her dad ran a school, so she was very educated when most women weren't in India. Mm-hmm. And she wrote hundreds of letters to Queen Victoria saying, look, we're women. India is part of the British Empire at the moment. Come on, pull your finger out. Do something to help women here. She was invited over to Britain. She actually met Queen Victoria.
Wow.
She converted from Hindu to Christianity because she was like, right, Hinduism is so fixed in your caste and so sexist. And she was a little disappointed that Christianity turned out to be fairly sexist as well. But her opinion at the time was it was going to be the way forward, move back to India and set up schools which are still running. There are still schools being run in her name. One of the first great female educationists in that part of the world. So the song we've got about her is kind of about her with all of Malala Yousafzai's words, who of course is the Afghani girl who insisted on going to school even after the Taliban had taken over and said no girls allowed to go in. Right. And her and a friend, the school bus was shot and the two of them were stopped and the two of them were shot in the head for daring at the age of 6 or so to still want to go to school and be educated. And there was enough of a outcry that money was raised. She was flown to Birmingham, where she was operated on in Britain hospital, and has gone on to be an amazing advocate for education, and particularly for girls' education. So I immediately broke some of my rules about the album that it had to be centenaries, because she's actually
That's awesome.
a quarter of a century old. She was 25.
Right.
But her book, I'm Malala, is it's one of my favourite songs on the album, because basically I didn't write it. I was just like jotting notes while reading her biography. Yeah. And there's such great words. I can just kind of mess them about a bit and make them rhyme. And as a song, books show injustice in a way that stays with you and makes you feel a need to do something about it. I thought that's exactly what we were saying about sapere, about seizing knowledge and reason and understanding, using education to move yourself forward.
Powerful, very strong.
Yeah, so I think she's fabulous. Crip Camp is one of my favourites. That's another one. That's Judy Hoyman, who is the great American civil rights advocate for disabled rights. I was saying about my dad, he actually ended up working in a company for disabled rights. He trained as a doctor, then became a joiner, worked on a lot of building sites, and he ended up linking these things by going to people's houses with serious disabilities and converting the houses so they could actually live at home and didn't have to be in institutional care. And set up a very political business about trying to change government laws. And this is exactly what Judy Hoyman was doing in America. She trained as a teacher, and then the state refused to let her work because they said she was a fire risk because she was in a wheelchair. So she took the New York...
Common sense, isn't it?
Yeah.
Jeez.
But she took them to court to fight this. And from there went on, because the Bill of Rights was already in play at this time. And there was a Section 504 which was written that Nixon was like, disabled rights? Yeah, we don't need that. Chuck that bit out. So she was trying to get this reinstated. And then the next government, Carter and Caifano as well, they completely blocked it. This is too expensive. This can't happen. And this was all going on during the Vietnam War. And it just seemed to be such an amazing moment that I tried to pull it all into the song. Because on one side you've got Ho Chi Minh, who was a teacher, who was desperately wanting to link with America, who fought with America in the Second World War. Obviously, Napoleon III had invaded Vietnam, taken it over in the 1850s, kept it as part of Indochina, French ruled. But the Japanese had gone in, taken it over completely. Ho Chi Minh and his communist uprising group, they fought the Japanese out. They worked with America. He used all of the words of the US Declaration of Independence when he was declaring independence for Vietnam, saying we are all free citizens under one God with equal rights. And then Charles de Gaulle invaded France, and America stepped back and went, oh no, we're scared of communism. So this was going on at the time. In fact, there's some lines in the song when Carter said, we can't afford to help, we've got bombs to buy. Vietnamese peasants we must blow to the sky. And we knew, like those peasants, the world wanted us silent or dead. So she was saying she could was really feeling for the other groups that were disadvantaged around the world. And sure enough, when they actually went and took over the government buildings, all of these guys in wheelchair with serious health issues, and the police blockaded the streets and tried to stop them getting any medicine or anything. And how long did they? It's still the longest that any group in America has managed to occupy government buildings for. And she took all of her mates and they flew out to the White House as well. So you've got different parts being blockaded by disabled people. The Black Panthers started coming in, bringing them breakfasts, bringing them the medicines they needed. And they were saying, this isn't your war. And they're like, yes, it is. You want to make the world a better place?
Yeah.
So do we. It's the same war. Gay rights groups were coming, demonstrating. And I feel that was a wonderful moment for crystallizing civil rights movements, certainly in America, but even around the world, where people could make links and see, no, if one group is being crapped on, we all are. You can't say, don't care about the gays, don't care about the cripples. It's all one movement to try to get equality for everyone.
Yeah.
There's so much Sid Charisse, who was the first dancer to insure a body part. So she insured her legs for, the song's called $1 Million Legs. It's actually 2 million.
Right.
She insured her legs for $1 million for each leg.
Where was this? Where was she from?
She was American. She was danced with Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire. She's in Singing in the Rain. But she was very, very Republican, and Richard Nixon absolutely adored her.
I'm sure he did.
Yes. My Republican dove, he called her. And tried to get her in TV campaigns for them. So.
Out of all them, do you have one that you just want to keep going back to all the time? You haven't mentioned?
I mean, Judy Hyman, I have huge respect for. And sadly, she died last month. I sent her the song. I managed to get her personal email. I sent her the song on her birthday towards the end of last year.
Wow.
And I thought, maybe she... And I really hope she listened to it. And then I found out actually she'd been ill for months and months. And last month she died. So I don't know if she ever heard the song. But I feel she did. She definitely got it. And so did her organisation. So I really hope someone played it to her.
Yeah.
And I love Gil Scott-Heron as a musician. We had the same publisher briefly. Canongate Books in Edinburgh published a lot of his work. And I found out his dad was the first black footballer for Celtic in the Scottish League.
Yeah,
the
right.
Glasgow club. And it would have been his centenary. So that was a really interesting one to find out about. And
why don't we know about that? I mean, you know about the baseball with Jackie Robertson. But why don't we know about football? Is it football?
It is football, yeah. And he was a massive all-round sportsman. He was Jamaican. He'd been in the national team for boxing. While in Glasgow, he also played in the local cricket teams. It was all of them. He'd had an affair with Bobby Scott, a singer in Chicago, who was Gil Scott-Heron, his son's mum, who never really knew his dad because he then got given this contract to play in Britain, in Glasgow.
Interesting.
And left. But he was also a published poet. So obviously that sort of lyricism that Gil Scott-Heron with "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised" and such classics did come from him. Imperfect person, wonderful boxer, footballer, cricketer, runner, and a pretty absent, shite father. But interesting character.
Very cool. I want to talk more about China. Like your decisions for China. You said you haven't been there before, but what were your first initial reaction to being here? And you've obviously been here for a long time now. Or have you moved to other places?
No, we've been here 10 years or so.
10 years.
The band's been going nearly 10 years.
Yeah. You come to China. Did you leave the band?
Well, I left a band in Edinburgh.
Yeah.
It was called Torpedo Boy.
And how was that going? Did they have records?
It was, we were on a little label called Habibi Records. We were too big size-wise and not big enough sales-wise. I sort of come back from South America going, oh my God, we have to have a trumpet and a trombone and a full percussion section. And so there was, at the biggest, I think there were 12 of us, but there was always at least 8 of us. And I think we sounded amazing. But we got, brilliant Brazilian trumpet player, the tallest guy you've ever seen, the Scottish bassist, who was like 7 foot tall. And we were a very interesting ragbag collective of every colour and every different size. And so we were playing a lot in Edinburgh, around there, in Glasgow, and a bit out to Manchester and things. And then I had kids. And after one child, we realised we needed to move out of our kind of 1-bedroom flat we were in. I was working as a teacher. My wife had just finished her master's and had just started working mainly as a translator in a commodities trading company.
Oh, yeah.
As I said, she's Serbian and speaks lots of languages far too well. And it took us a long time to have the first child. So we bought a bigger flat that we couldn't really afford. And as soon as we'd signed all the contracts, realised Yana was pregnant again and went, hang around. Ooh, when you're on maternity leave, we actually can't pay this mortgage. We thought it took so long for Bella to pop up that we were absolutely safe. And that got us back into international teaching. Like I said, we'd lived in Peru and I lived in Eastern Europe quite a lot. And we were like, okay, international jobs, they give you housing. We'd already been in Egypt during the Second Gulf War.
Wow.
Which was a really interesting time to be there. Yana had worked for the UN then, mainly for UNHCR. Yeah, that was a really interesting time. Because all the world were in Cairo because it was the closest safe place to Iraq, basically.
Yeah.
So, and there are not that many bars, because it's obviously a Muslim country. There's like a couple of really good rooftop and cellar ones and a few old British ones. But it's kind of a handful for such a big city. And everywhere we went out, everyone we met, it's like, oh, you look familiar. Oh, you're ITV's main reporter, yeah. You're Russia's top surgeon for field injuries. Okay, yeah. I just felt so insignificant compared to everyone I met.
Yeah.
But we loved it. So we got offered a job at the British School in Cairo, British International School of Cairo, moved over there with a free house included, rented our place in Edinburgh, which we've never lived in. So that's been rented ever since.
Yeah, right.
And after a couple of years there, and got there in the middle of the Arab Spring and the huge uprisings to get rid of Mubarak, with all the army on the streets. That's probably why they gave me a job there, no one else wanted one. And so in the second year, Yana had already had her son Max in Egypt on the banks of the Nile. He was actually in a hospital overlooking the Nile, not outside. But her company was like, we can't have the electricity being cut, the internet being cut for like 8 hours at a time. With this trading, you could lose us £1 million by being offline that long. So her and the kids moved back to Britain. By this time, I realised, even though these Egyptian kids are a little bit spoilt that I'm teaching and difficult, I don't want to go back and teach in Scotland. And we had a conversation, where would we like to live? And we decided we'd worked in Africa and quite a lot in Eastern Europe and around Europe, and in Peru. And we'd not lived in Asia at all. So we looked at where Yana could get a job as a translator and commodities trader, and that's how we ended up whittling it down to either Singapore or Shanghai. And she's like, right, I'm not bothered about going, but if you get a good job in either of those cities, then we'll move. If you don't, bite the bullet, come back and get beaten up by all these Scottish kids that go to school. And we did. So we actually worked for the Singaporean school in Shanghai. So
right.
It's a bit of a mix of the two.
There you go. And every person that I interview that's been here for a while now says that the music scene here, like maybe that time where you come, it was like even the city was like the Wild West.
Yeah, it was a lot wilder. There was definitely a lot more drugs and things around.
Right.
It was, felt a lot less controlled.
So no phones, maybe not at that, maybe at that stage, but...
I mean, mobiles, but none of these apps like DD.
Right, yeah.
Taxis, you just had to wait for hours on streets with hordes of people pushing past you to try and wave taxis down. You couldn't get away with speaking no Chinese.
Yes.
You had to order all your food and taxis and things, but my level didn't get much beyond that, right. I have to say. Yeah. It was a great... We actually made money playing as well. Like I said, we toured Japan.
Right.
We recorded the first, that set of 10 albums, all with money we made from just playing a couple of times a week in different clubs. Mm. There seemed to be a lot more bars that would have bands on. I think the law existed that you were meant to pay a tax if you had a band on, but it was never enforced. Right. So I don't think it was a new law that suddenly... If you're playing somewhere in the charge, you have to pay, I think $160 equivalent of as a tax. But that kind of takes all the profits away.
Yeah.
So it was great fun. It was a great time to be. And the music scene was really welcoming. We played the 10th anniversary of some punk club out in Zhujiajiao and the little water towns on the outside with a load of the local bands. And within a week we'd got 8 gigs. They're like, come and play with us. Round Eye,
yes.
Probably the biggest expat band here, going the longest. Chachi was like, awesome, get on stage with us and just jam on the sax. I was like, sure? I wasn't sure I wasn't going to mess it up.
Yeah.
So how do you know? And I felt in Manchester or Edinburgh or Glasgow, it's a much, much slower rise to playing the kind of bigger clubs. It takes years to get that recognition.
Yes.
Whereas here it felt very quick to be playing really nice venues.
They were screaming out for this sort of music.
Yeah, and there was no one really playing anything like what we were playing.
Yeah.
And still isn't. And maybe that's because no one wants to hear it.
But that's so good, but it's good in a way that they haven't heard this sort of music, so when they do hear it, they're just like... I don't know about you, but I've noticed that they respect musicians more here in China.
Maybe it's hard. On the flip side, there is very much a glass ceiling, and if you're an expat band singing in English, you can get to those bigger venues quite quickly.
Yes.
But I think if we'd been playing in Britain with this band and touring, it would have taken longer. But I think we'd have a much, 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 much bigger following now and be doing a lot more touring around Europe and selling out places, whereas here you kind of reach that level, and there's 1 or 2 bands who have gone beyond it, but it's, in fact, Shanghai Calling, I think, are the only band I know who actually are selling out some of the bigger arenas,
right.
The way that Chinese language bands are, and they're almost entirely instrumental. It's fabulous prog rock, building stuff, a little bit like Mogwai mixed with Royskop. They're a fabulous band, but I think maybe that's partly how they've done it, and by working very hard and touring a lot. Yeah.
And was it easy for you to start Hogchokers here in China?
Yeah, I just fell into it. Like I said, the guy Jarrett, the drummer I met, we'd got kids of the same age, we lived in the same area, we started meeting for beers, and he's like, I was outside playing sax at one point, he's like, oh, play sax, my bassist lead singer's just left, do you want to come and jam with us? Yeah. So I jammed with him and their guitars, and I bought my electric guitar. I knew they were a kind of thrash rock band, and he's like, no, I wanted you to bring the sax. So we kind of just started jamming, we recorded lots of little bits we were doing, I turned them into songs, and that was it. That was Hogchoker. The first album was nearly all built on little riffs we'd just jammed over 3 months, sitting in a little basement, basically.
Yeah. I read on WeChat that it was your 6th or 7th album that you've released, and then this is also our 6th or 7th lineup change.
Yeah, and you were asking what's the plans now. Well, there's Shanghai Calling Festival. That would be great. And we've got a couple more gigs before then, and then I'm going back to England for the summer, see the family. I'm trying to make sure my kids feel they've got a real base there.
Yeah.
Where my mum is. And actually last year we went back halfway through the lockdown, sort of end of April, and our kids went to the local school I'd gone to as a kid. They let them in straight away, so they had the whole last term there. We came back in July, and this was when all the prices were ridiculously expensive. There were no direct flights from Britain, so we had to go and wait 2 days in Amsterdam, do 2 COVID tests on each day before allowed to go on. Fly to Belgium, do 2 COVID tests there, waiting for the flight, in the line for the flight. Where the hell's the last result? And my son had got COVID. So we lost tens of thousands and came back to Britain. But again, it took so long to get the documents again, because our work visa's expired, that my kids had the first term of this school year as well in the schools in Britain. So I feel it was kind of a blessing in disguise. They've had they've got a really good group of mates there now. It's a very tiny village outside Manchester, so there's not many kids there. They know everyone, and I think that's the fear of us as international teachers, that your kids are going to have no base and are going to feel very rootless, because even if we lived in Shanghai forever, the kids they're at international school with are all going to move on and travel somewhere else.
Yeah, right. What are you most proud of?
Yeah, the kids.
Yeah.
Absolutely. In fact, the last collection of poetry that I ended up talking about in Hong Kong, because I couldn't mention the gig, is all about the journey of us. And we were married quite a long time, just having fun. Because like I said, we got married in our 20s. We've got plenty of time. But when we decided to have kids, it took a long time. We did IVF, we did loads of tests. And I was kind of writing at the time. And eventually I collected all this together into a collection. There was having Max during the revolution in Egypt. There was a lot of poems about that, comparing the birth of, or what we hoped was going to be birth of democracy there, with the birth of Max. But it's been a fabulous, fabulous journey. They're like 10 and 12 now, and have made me laugh so much and have such fun, and are doing great. Bella played her first concert, my daughter, last week.
Come on.
She played a Crip, a slightly cleaned up version.
Right. Radio version.
Yeah. And my son's doing these amazing flips. He's got the springboard diving gene.
Right.
So he was just sending me some videos. Yeah, so it is. I mean, I'm really happy about all the music and things. I think the current lineup of Hogchoker is the best it's ever been. And I'm really sad that we've just lost our drummer and the bassist, who is currently in Beijing getting married, to the most fabulous Nigerian woman who's just finished a doctorate here and who I made to sing on some of these songs.
Come on.
I think I mentioned about often more woke people being a little bit too earnest. And so a lot of these songs are from the point of view of a woman.
So she sung 4 or 5 songs, was it?
Between her and Tina Turner Tricks, they did 4 songs that were specifically from a woman's perspective. Right. Or some, like the bassist was going, you can't really sing lots of Julius Nyerere as a black freedom fighter fighting the British as that. And I was like, well, I thought people would love it if I blacked up, if I went blackface and put a dress on and just performed like that, and people would realise I'm really empathising with people of different races and different genders, and the whole band like, are you joking? Oh God, I don't know if you're joking. You might actually do that and think it's all right. So I thought, no, it's okay. But Tom, do you think your girlfriend would sing a few songs for us? Yeah. So they're moving to Amsterdam. So we lose kind of half the band over the summer. But like I said, we've got a great new drummer who I'll be practicing a bit more with this week.
Come on.
And a couple of people lined up for bass, maybe. I'll not jinx it by saying who, but there are people in other bands at the moment where members of the bands are leaving.
Best piece of advice you've ever been given?
I was asked what advice would I give to a younger me,
Oh,
which is a very similar one.
yeah.
And definitely, this is not advice that you could give to a 21 or 20-year-old these days, but to my 20-year-old self, I wish someone said, like, girls actually like sex as well. You probably can ask people, and probably if someone's come back with you, they're probably quite like you. And, you know, as a young man, you always feel, oh, guys are wanting sex, and girls don't want it at all, and I'm too scared to ask and push. And when I was working as an artist as well, when actually nearly all the people I did say, can I paint you naked, were like, yeah, sure. And I said, oh, I wish I'd asked a few more.
Yeah. Social medias, where can we find you for our Chinese listeners and for our Australian listeners as well?
The last few albums are all on
Well, they can
Spotify.
listen to your playlist.
Yeah. all your general Spotify, Apple Music, iTunes.
Just Hogchoker?
All of those things. Just Hogchoker. I think for the Bandcamp and SoundCloud, you have to type Hogchoker Band.
Right.
A Hogchoker, you know, I was saying about getting some of my like childhood heroes like Big Youth playing with us on the album before this one. And they were really into it, these great Jamaican guys. And then there was a long pause. We've been sending music back and forth. And I wrote, like, what's going on? They were like, hey, we just realised, Hogchoker, we're Rastas. For us, the pig is a filthy animal. We cannot be in a band named after swine. And I was like, no, it's a fish. It really is. It's a fish. People here think it's some sort of perverted sex act. And I like that. You know, I like to keep the idea going. It's actually a fish that our drummer, who had a very poor relationship with his dad, they travelled a lot around the world and he always felt distant. He said his best memory was on Nags Head Beach in North Carolina, fishing with his dad, and they caught this really ugly flatfish. And his dad said, that's a Hogchoker.
Right.
And he thought, that must be the toughest fish ever if it can choke a hog. And he thought it was a great name for a band. So I sent them back all these pictures of this fish and the little story. I said, look, there's a band logo. You see, it's a fish. It's nothing to do with pigs. I waited a few days and then they sent me their tracks back with one line that just said, fish good. But I mean, last summer was great. I did some solo shows. Like I said, we were stuck for longer than we planned.
Yes.
Because of COVID. Ended up meeting this guy who used to be the singer of this band called Nizlopi, which had one massive hit called the JCB song about me and my dad in a JCB, which was a really cute Christmas #1 all over Europe, and inspired Ed Sheeran. They were Ed Sheeran's favourite band ever. He was like a teenager and he kind of did work experience with them and came and tuned the guitars for them on the tour. And he's actually said, these are the guys that got me into making music.
Right.
For which some people might thank them, some people might not. But he was doing a solo tour, so I joined him for some of the tour. That was really nice last summer. So I'm hoping we'll have something like that with me and the violinist.
Really cool.
And then it's back here, last couple of shows for this album. And then we've already got lots of ideas for the new album. So once we've got the new lineup, we've actually recorded a couple of
already
demo tracks, getting ready.
Fantastic. That's so creative.
It's actually all based around superheroes. There's Captain UK, who's this plump, middle-aged superhero who keeps selling off all of his superpowers. There's the Batman's love song to Robin about how much he loves him.
So the truth comes out.
Absolutely. There's Robin singing to Batman. It's called I Want to Drive the Batmobile. And it's all like, why am I dressed up like a fucking Christmas tree? Do you want me to look like a masturbatory gay icon? Why haven't I got a cool name? You're there in the black. And of course the answer is in the next song, which I just mentioned. So yeah, that's the superhero album.
That's really cool.
That'll be out in a year or so, I guess.
Come on. Yeah, that's fantastic. All right, we're down to the last part where I just asked you a couple of questions and you just give me your top 2 or 3 favourite as of today. Number 1, who are your top 2 or 3 favourite bands of all time?
Camper Van Beethoven are very high because they were so influential to me in just the vast array of music.
Yes.
And the same with Mr. Bungle. Culture Clash. Oh God, what are they called? Culture Shock. It's Kulture for the culture anyway. Culture Shock. And they're all East European immigrants. They're based in America. But they play amazing klezmer, a bit like Gogol Bordello, but even punker and crazier with the violins and clarinets and everything just going. Great songs called things like God is busy, may I help you? So yeah, that would be my top 3 bands at the moment.
What was the first album you ever bought?
I think it was Boomtown Rats. Yeah, whichever one had Don't Like Mondays on.
Oh yeah.
Tonic for the Troops or Fine Art of Surfacing. I'm pretty sure that was the first one.
And what was the last album you bought?
It will almost certainly have been a Shanghai band if I actually paid for it. Right. Be like Parachutes on Fire I bought last year, and the Banjax album.
You've been in the Shanghai music scene for a while. 2 or 3 of your favourites?
Okay, Hey Lily, absolutely love. They're really great. Rolling Bowling, who are kind of big rockabilly Beijing band. Played them a few times. I actually played sax for them last time they were in Shanghai.
Nice.
And I was so bad that they came to the rehearsal with I thought 7 or 8 tracks really down well. They were like, why don't you just play these 3? And yeah, we'll see about it. I think maybe our guy's going to come over as well. But it was still great to be on stage, do a few songs with them.
That's cool. Your top 2 or 3 favourite books?
Ooh. I'm currently reading John Burnett, who is maybe American lawyer, but who's lived in Thailand most of his life. And he does these great Thai detective novels about Sanjap Jeep, who is a Thai policeman whose mother was a prostitute and whose father was, well, you don't know at the start of them, but a Westerner. And he's grown up in a sort of mixed Western and Thai culture and been seen as very kind of low caste. I know caste isn't really a Thai, but and they're great gripping stories, but I found them so interesting, all about Buddhism and Thai culture.
Yeah, right.
And the character keeps on addressing you as a reader and being so Farang. You, from your Western capitalist there, you cannot understand that some people might do things that are not about earning more money. But here in Thailand, this is why this happens. And he just goes off in these little monologues that I find really funny and very...
right.
So yeah, that's John Burnett. Bangkok 8 is the first one, and Bangkok Tattoo. They're great. I love Gould's Book of Fish, and I've forgotten who's written it. But it's sitting here with an Australian. It's an Australian author who's not Peter Carey, and was all about early convicts who were sent onto this little island as part of Tasmania, and it's from the point of view of one of them who gets obsessed with staring at the scene, drawing fish, and that was a really fascinating book.
That's great. Really, I'm going to look at all those. Last question. Who's your greatest inspiration / hero and why?
I think with these things you generally end up coming back to family, don't you? Because they are the people who've been most influential.
They're the rock.
In bringing you up. There's every now and then there's a teacher or an artist in somewhere who you really feel moved, but you haven't got that close enough connection with them usually for them to have really been influential. And I think my dad and family generally. I'm just thinking about on my mum's side, her mother, was this amazing firebrand of a English teacher. I was at her funeral not very long ago, and she'd been teaching in the same town in Wales for decades, and I met so many of her ex-students who were all like, "Oh, is it true that Firebrand was actually an agent in the war? No, she was in Germany. And there were all these crazy stories about it. And she was studying German in Cambridge before the war.
Right.
So she was in Germany at the outbreak of the war.
Wow.
And all of her students had got her built up. We hear that she was a mistress of T.S. Eliot. Is that right? And I was like, she used to tell a story that, yes, she'd slept in the same bed as T.S. Eliot, and then said, but I wasn't in it at the time. He stayed with us when he was doing some reading, so I slept in my friend's bed, and he had my bed for one night.
Oh, right. Okay.
So, yeah, she was very influential. On my dad's side, again, his mother, who had she started the first women's health clinic in Britain, and she was one of the first female doctors to graduate from Manchester University, and was always so interested in young people and what was happening. Like when I was a teenager and early 20s at university, she'd get me in and she'd be, okay, Simon, now don't lie to me. Don't think of me as an old person. I'm actually really interested in this. How do you feel like when you take ecstasy? Come on, I haven't. Yes, you have. Tell me, what does it feel like first? And she was just so interested in everything that was going on. And then my dad was the same. He had a pretty short attention span or a low boredom threshold, like me. I feel that's partly why I jump around so many things and areas. I think it's partly hereditary that he went from being a doctor to an artist to a joiner to an activist, and was always fascinated in the world around him and always willing to take risks. And I feel that was a great, would my wife and mum say that was a great role model for me? It's certainly been how I've kind of lived my life a bit. I remember at one point he said to me and my brother, he's like, okay, if you get any good grass at university, bring the seeds back for me. And there are still thousands of people, I think, in Derbyshire and Manchester and Sheffield who are going through cancer treatment or who have had serious spinal injuries and things, who are smoking the cuttings off this original huge plantation of weed that my dad germinated in the air and covered all these seeds, planted them all out in the garden. Mum was terrified that the police were going to come and arrest him, but there were so many people who swore it was the only way they could eat when they were on chemotherapy. That some of his, and this is while he was running the company for disabled people, so many people swore it was the only way they could get the back pain to stop, who had serious spinal injuries.
Surely you could get some sort of license for that, right?
Well, not 20 years ago. I think now there is more, but at the time, and the people that his company were employing to help these guys, who were some of the funniest people I'd met. They were so unself-pitying. They, guys in wheelchair who'd had horrific injuries, and I was like a teenager, and they'd be like, you can bloody shake me hand properly, it's my legs that are fucked, my arm's not going to fall off, come on, Simon. You've not met Crip before? I'm a Crip, it's all right. And they were really blunt, really funny, very... the first time I ever heard a piss on pity was like these guys and girls who worked with Dad who were just like, no, we don't want anyone feeling sorry for us. We want to be out of institutionalised care. We want to be able to be in the workplace. We want to be able to pay people to help us because we can't use our hands and legs well enough. And so a lot of Dad's thing with growing the dope was so that their helpers weren't put in an awkward position with them saying, this really helps me. Can you go and score? And then being, well, we don't want to break the law, but at the same time, we want to do what's best for you. So there, 3 answers in one. But
Awesome. Simon, that was great. I think we could have chatted for another hour or so.
Well, there's a bar across the street.
There you go. What a great story. And inspiring too. Like, music, travelling, family. You're making people happy.
I hope so. And basically doing what I want and making myself happy at the same time.
There you go.
It's a good thing, isn't it?
And that's a win-win situation. And good luck with your band. Sounds like you've got a lot of energy and juices flowing for new material. So
yeah, I think it's a good time.
Yeah, all the best. Good luck.
Thank you very much, Craig. Thank you for having me.
大家好, I'm Bala from Bala's Simple Chinese School. If you are a beginner, intermediate, advanced, looking for HSK study, business Chinese, or simply want to improve your everyday communication, I'm the teacher for you. Come and join me for a free travel class at Bala's Simple Chinese School.